Welcome back. We are coming up to 11 minutes into the weekend edition of All Angles here on ENCA on the Sunday. Government has consistently assured South Africans the national grid will not collapse. Now they're making even more promises. In fact, Electricity Minister Hosientsho Ramokgopa says blackouts will be drastically reduced by the end of the year. In fact, he says come Christmas, you and I will be gifted with 4,000 megawatts of additional power. Let's discuss this with Chris Hattingh from the Center for Risk Analysis. Chris, great to chat to you again. I mean, this obviously is a threat of an electricity grid collapse. Is it likely where you and I sit right now?
Well, hi, William, and good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to discuss this ongoing electricity crisis. I think a grid collapse at this point is highly unlikely, maybe in the 0.1% to 1% range of probability. It is not impossible, sort of a perfect storm, maybe of sabotage, of pylons collapsing due to lack of maintenance. That sort of thing could happen, but we don't foresee that happening anytime soon. That doesn't mean that those citizens and businesses that can't have some sort of backup contingencies and plans in place should prepare for those. Of course, the majority of South Africans just can't afford to make those sorts of plans, unfortunately. So while we see it as a high improbability, we cannot rule it out categorically.
And obviously, Chris, for a South African to plan their lives around the probability, it's almost asking for the implausible, right? I mean, Electricity Minister says 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts will come online by December, dismissing what the SG of the governing party was saying that, no, this will be fixed a lot sooner, or there will be solutions that will be found before the end of the year. What's your take on that?
I think maybe the best, the clearest light at the end of the tunnel for Eskom is the coming back online of Kuiberg, the majority of the supply that Kuiberg can supply, the maintenance that is being extended at the nuclear power station. That period has been extended over longer than Eskom had initially planned. So that would help a lot in terms of bringing additional megawatts onto capacity. But even then, let's assume that Eskom gets a good handle on unplanned outages, keeping it below the 15,000 megawatt threshold for which they are aiming throughout the winter months. Maybe they can get a good progress and handle on that with getting their maintenance in hand at the coal-fired power stations. That also means that you need good maintenance and upgrading of transmission networks, transmission lines. You need backup equipment when certain equipment breaks down. You need to cross your fingers and hope very strongly that the open cycle gas turbines, which are now almost becoming a backbone for Eskom, these pieces of equipment were not designed to be run 24/7. You need to hope that they continue to run, that Eskom has adequate diesel supply as well as the funding for that diesel supply. So if these sort of different elements can come together, your transmission lines hold, local entities such as City Power in Johannesburg get a handle on their maintenance, then I think we could look at lower stages of load shedding through the end of the year. But I think also keeping in mind the context of a national election coming up next year, one should maybe take statements that the end of load shedding will happen by Christmas. We should take those with maybe more than a pinch of salt.
And of course, the conundrum that the electricity minister was facing, Chris, was the actual powers. Now they've been handed to him. He says collaboration is important between him, the public enterprises and mineral resources minister. I don't know if you saw on Twitter, I think yesterday, Vincent Magwenya tweeting that Hosientsho and Gwede get along. And I'm paraphrasing. He used the word, there's a good vibe between them. What's your take?
I would very much hope that we could convert some of those positive vibes into electric current for the grid to try and assist Eskom where they need those extra megawatts. I mean, on the surface, one wants to see cooperation between different ministers. You want to see the plans of President Ramaphosa coming to fruition. But I fear that the latest delegation of powers might just add more confusion to the sort of knot that we've already seen. I think if you read the substantive powers in subsection 34, in section 34, subsection 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act, that's really where the heart of powers lie, and those remain with the current Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. So I want to see progress here, and I hope to be proven wrong. but I think we're adding more to the sense of confusion and who really gets to delegate and decide on these powers. I think President Ramaphosa wanted to be seen to be moving on the electricity crisis by bringing in this new position of a Minister of Electricity located in the presidency. But I worry that due to the different sort of interests and the grounds of responsibility and responsibilities and powers within both the ANC, but also within wider government and the tripartite alliance, maybe the president underestimated how much he could really move powers in a substantive way. So on the surface, it looks like something's happening, but I don't think we're going to see much in terms of a real substantive action for the new minister having these radical powers to act.
And for clarity's sakes, Chris, I mean, talk us through, as the ordinary South African watching this afternoon, what does this mean moving forward? Will the electricity minister be able to perhaps get us out of the dark, essentially?
I think it could boil down to how much freedom and scope for action the Eskom executives and the Eskom board are given if we at any point soon get a new Eskom CEO, if different ministers really allow Eskom and the board to move forward with maintenance, to hire and fire as they see fit, to make decisions based on meritocratic criteria where they really want to appoint people based on how well they can do their jobs versus not, then maybe we could see real progress. But in terms of the moving of powers and delegations, I don't think, unless the president announces more changes in terms of subsection 2 of section 34 of the Electricity Regulation Act, I don't think you're going to see a real movement in terms of Eskom getting a handle on things. In the meantime, the private sector and those who are able to are, of course, trying to build up additional capacity. That should be rightly applauded and rewarded as best as people can make those plans. But for the time being, I don't think the majority of South Africans should lie awake at night hoping that Eskom will get a handle on their own issues. I hope that they get more of a handle on the maintenance that they're struggling with, that they get more access to the necessary backup equipment, access to diesel, all that sort of stuff that could help in lowering the stages of load shedding. But just because there's been such a lack of maintenance and it's had this massive buildup over years and months now, despite Eskom's best efforts throughout many power stations, from very top to bottom, they're fighting a very difficult uphill battle. There will be peaks and troughs, but for now, I think we're dealing with stages 4, 5, and 6 of load shedding, possibly stage 8 at the worst for the coming months, at least through the end of winter.
Chris, thank you so much for your time and painting that somewhat dim picture of what, in reality, us as South Africans can brace ourselves for in the next few weeks. I mean, that was Center for Risk Analysis, Head of Policy Analysis, Chris Hattingh, chatting to us live.